to be my official live stream on my YouTube channel, and probably I may take it to Instagram live, my Facebook live, and TikTok live. For now, I don't know, but this is the first official live stream. So, for those of you who haven't met or known the voice behind Susie's Cakes recipes, this is a person, and my name is Susan Ape. I'm a pastry chef, I'm a cake artist, and I'm also an instructor. So, my moments of truth is what I'm going to be titling this live stream. This particular live stream is going to, if I'm going to continue making live streams about baking in general, my baking career, my baking journey, quizzes, and all that. If I'm going to be making it or not. But hopefully, this live stream is going to make me continue. Now, I'm going to title this live stream as what I call Moments of Truth, and I'm going to be bearing it all baking, what has worked for me over the years, what I've taught a lot of my on-site and online students. You're going to be getting some first-hand information from me. So let me see in the chat what you want me to talk about, what you want me to share, what you want me to speak about. But today I'm going to be talking about the science of baking. I know this is something most bakers or most people know. Let me not use the word bakers. Most people know that baking is science. And if you are a layman, if you have not heard about it before, well, I'm just telling you today that baking is science. If you sign up for any of my basic baking classes, you know that one of the things I usually say from the beginning is baking is science. Now, baking is like a perfect combination of scientific experiments, that is when you combine the reactions of chemistry, the processes of biology, and the laws of physics. That is it. I'm not a science student, but my flair, my passion for baking made me study some scientific concept, make me to understand things about baking, that and I'm like, wow, so that things like this I talk about baking, that baking is this broad, is this wide, and that is why I've understood the concept behind baking. That's merely just seeing a recipe, studying a recipe, I can say that this recipe is good and this recipe is bad, just merely studying it without even working it out yet. That's because I've studied every aspect of every item that goes into my baked treats. And that's the essence or the purpose of me trying to create this live stream. I'm trying to make my audience, which is you, understand that when you get to know every item, everything that's done or is added into your baked treats, you are one step away of getting a perfect result at all times. At all times. So, like I said, baking just like any scientific experiments. You as a baker, you're the scientist. So baking just like any scientific experiments. Chemistry, in chemistry you mix different edible chemicals, from flour to baking powder to yeast to edible colors. You mix them together to create either a dough or a batter, which sometimes have tiny bubbles or air in them. So that's just like the chemistry aspect of baking. Then there's the biological aspect of baking. Like when you make bread or yeast doughs, yeast raised doughs. If you watch some of my videos, you see I talk about yeast raised doughs a lot. Yes, when you make something like bread or yeast raised dough, you discover that yeast provides a kind of culture where carbon dioxide where it produces carbon dioxide that makes your dough rise. That is your dough. That particular, I'm going to go break this down into what I call into the basics. So I'm be explaining things that you probably have heard or you have seen or felt. That's just the essence of this live stream. So like I said, the yeast you add into like your yeast raised doughs, your bread, it provides carbon dioxide that makes that dough rise or proof. If I've heard me mentioning the word proof, rise is the same thing. Now the physics part of baking. I said from the beginning that baking is a science that consists of processes of biology, the reactions of chemistry, and then the laws of physics. Now, the physics part of it is all this air that the yeast or your baking powder produces, that is trapped inside your dough or your batter, begins to rise, begins to affect your baked treats or when you've baked them. So this is the logic behind baking. For scientists or science students, or if you've studied science or if you had anything to do with working in laboratories, you discover that this language is not strange. But to those of us who have not actually studied science, or we don't have a flair for things like that, I'm just trying to break it to layman's understanding. Now, I do tell my students that you can't just pick a particular item and add it to your baked treat, or to your batter, or to your dough. What I mean by batter is what you mix together. Like, for instance, my Oreos cake recipe, the liquid, after we added all the items into the bowl, that liquid is called a batter. If you're making a samosa or spring roll wrap, that liquid is called a batter. Why? If you watch my no knead bread recipes or my bread recipes, that mixture mixed together is called a dough. So for pastries and yeast raised recipes, that mixture is a dough. While for cakes and like for some small chops recipe, that mixture is called a batter. I hope you understand. Please, I want to see your reactions. I want to see if I'm carrying you along. I want to see if you're understanding what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to like break this old logic of baking into smaller bits so that everybody's carried along. I've gotten some requests like, what are the terms you use in some of your videos, some of your written recipes, and I kind of started explaining. So this particular video just to carry everybody along. It's like what I call a first-hand online class. Let me say it like that. So when you understand how baking works, then you have a major key to always achieving the same results every time. When you understand how baking works, I've gotten sometimes complaints. Some people come up to me and say, I baked my cake came out too hard, or I made my pies came out so hard, or the center of my cake was not well baked, but the sides were well baked. What could be the result? And sometimes within seconds, I tell them this is what could be the possible results. This is what happened. This is what went wrong. And some very inquisitive students were asking me, how do you know? How did you just come up with this? And I'll tell them that it's because I studied all this, what a particular item adding to my baked treat is going to cost. So if I discover that I should be able to trace that fault to a particular item I added. I don't know if you understand what I mean here. Now, like I said when you understand how baking works, then you have a major key to always achieving effective results. And this is similar to running a lab experiment. This is very, very similar to that. Your kitchen is like your laboratory, and you are the scientist trying to run an experiment. Now you have to consider each item, like I'm saying, each item, your flour, your sugar, your egg, your yeast, your baking powder, the liquid items. You have to consider them. You have to consider their proportion, the measurements. You can't just use your head to guess. Okay, this should be roughly half cup. Oh, okay, this should be roughly 2 tablespoons. Yes, yes. No, 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 this should be quarter cup. You can't do that. I've seen some bakers that say, um when they have people around and they don't want them knowing their particular recipe, they don't bring out their measuring spoons and cups. They just like dish their hands, or dip a particular bowl into their, let's say, their flour, and measure, and most times it's accurate. Please don't try that. Don't try that. It's actually very wrong. If you want to bake very well, if you want to get the same result as what your recipe creator stated, then you have to consider the different items you're going to be using. You have to consider their proportion, their measurements, and you have to compare this with the atmosphere. Sometimes the atmosphere of your bakery, the 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 heat level of your bakery or the coldness of your bakery most times affects your baked treat. If you're making yeast raised doughs, for instance, like bread, like donuts, just name them, this particular atmosphere affects it. That's why sometimes we say keep your dough in a cool, dry place, or keep it in a warm environment. So all this is just to make sure you are getting the same result. Just like when you are trying to create a chemical reaction, there's a procedure you have to follow, the measurements you have to use, and it's just the same thing that applies to baking. Now, now, I usually say one thing. When you want to start baking, you have to first of all, like I said at the beginning of this video, know that baking is science. Come up with anything you like and add it into your bake item. No, it's very wrong. You can't just guess. It's wrong. You have to have what I call a recipe. And by the time you understand the science behind baking, you understand what every item stands for, you understand what they do to your bake item, to your bake treat rather. You also understand what a particular item will do in a dough and what it can do in a batter, then you are one step away from getting a perfect result every time. So that's the essence of me creating this live stream. And in subsequent live streams, I'm going to be talking about most of these baking items, what their particular role in some treats. Like there's some instances whereby you see some cakes we have baking powder or baking soda, and some will not. Then some will have both baking powder and baking soda. And for novice, they're like, why? Why is there an addition of two leavening agents in a particular recipe? Then some will have yeast. Yes, some cake recipes have yeast. And like, wow, it's cake. It's not a dough. Why is it having yeast? So in this live stream and subsequent live streams, I'm going to be talking more about all this. So I wrote down a list of some of the things I'm talking about today. So just want to check another of my points. Now, I said baked treats are not limited to cakes. They're not limited to cakes. They're not limited to bread. They're not limited to biscuits. And irrespective of your culture, irrespective of your country, your belief, your religion, you have definitely eaten cake or bread or 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 biscuits or anything made with flour, and you will know that each of these items are different in taste and texture. Like the taste of a cake, a regular cake, will be very, very different from the taste of bread. That's because of some of the items used in making them. Same with biscuits and same with some other pastries and confectionaries. Yes. Now, for my on-site or online students who signed up for some of my basic baking classes, one of the first thing I usually do is one of the first practical we usually carry out is baking a particular cake recipe, just a simple cake recipe. I just give them a simple or a basic recipe. And from that recipe, we're going to arrive at 4 different results. One recipe, same ingredients, 4 different results. How is this possible? That is where the science of baking comes in. From the mixing to the baking to the storing, these 3 processes results to 4 different results. So what I mean is, it's the same item, the same basic item, the flour, the sugar, the baking powder, and the eggs and butter. Yes, the same basic item that we're using for everything. But by the time we are through mixing, we discover that some cakes will be moist, like when you put it into your mouth, they have this melt in the mouth kind of texture. Same recipe. Another one we produce a cake that is hairy or fluffy, very light. That it's so light, it's like sponge, like all the sponge or foam. When you press it together, remove your hand, it's retains its previous texture. Same recipe, same ingredient. Then another experiment to produce a cake that strikes a balance between moist and fluffy. This is the same cake, the same recipe rather, the same measurements, the same items. Now it's producing another reaction. Then the last reaction is going to produce a cake that strikes a balance between everything. It's fluffy, it's moist, it has this crumbly texture. It's just everything. So this is why I say when you are trying to bake, you are first of all going to have a good recipe. You can't argue that. A good recipe. For my subsequent live stream, I'm going to tell you how to identify a good recipe. So you're going to first of all have a good recipe. This is paramount. This is very, very important. Have a very good recipe and then follow the recipe to the end. I don't believe in working with a new recipe and adding my own ideas. No. My aim is to achieve what the recipe creator achieved. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to make sure I'm following the recipe to the end. If the recipe creator suggested I use a substitute item, like instead of using sour cream I can use Greek yogurt, or instead of using sour cream I can use unsweetened yogurt or buttermilk, then fine. But if the recipe creator did not say go ahead and use a substitute item, then why use it? Because by the time you introduce a substitute item into your baked treats, you've changed the traditional result of that particular baked item. So like I said, baking is science. So if for instance I'll be following my recipe, you will know that I usually say follow the recipe to the end. Don't try to substitute anything. Don't try to do what I didn't do, except where I give substitutes that yes you can go ahead and use this item instead of this item. Apart from that, just go ahead and stick to the recipe to the end. You're going to get the same result. So if you are trying out a new recipe, you just have to stick to the recipe to the end. And that's thing I usually say is, as you bake, the more you bake, you will discover that you can make some items by yourself. You can remember some recipe by yourself without looking at your book or looking at a sketch pad or the board or anything. It's fine. It's very, very good. It shows that you're very good. Let's call it good student. Yes. But traditionally, no matter how how advanced you are, it is appropriate that you keep your recipe booklet, or you keep your recipe, or write out your recipe where you can see it. Mistakes can happen. I've dealt with situation whereby some people reported that they forgot flour, some say they forgot sugar, some says they forgot egg. Even my one of my on-site students, one of their sets forgot this particular chocolate cake recipe we kept baking, and they kept forgetting sugar in the recipe. Yes, that their final classes I had to sit with them like, yes, we're doing this together. List out all your items. I want to see where this issue is coming out from. So by the time you omit any item, it's going to affect your baked treats. So apart from having a good recipe, make sure you keep a recipe where you can see it. There's nothing bad in eyeballing your recipe. Oh yes, okay, yes, just to be sure. Make sure cross check. Nothing bad in doing that. The another thing is, after understanding your recipe, make sure you place whatever your recipe states where you can see them. Your flour is measured and it's on your work surface. Your baking powder is measured and it's on your work surface. Your icing sugar, your granulated sugar, whatever you're going to use is measured and they're on your work surface. It makes your work easier. You don't forget anything. If your recipe tells you preheat your oven, make sure you preheat your oven. Don't start with a cold oven. And don't start with there's sometimes most times when I'm preparing my one bowl recipes, immediately I measure out my item, the next thing I'm doing is to preheat my oven immediately. There are reasons for all this, and hopefully in subsequent videos I should be able to explain some of these things. So I've talked about baking being a science. I've talked about the chemistry aspect of it, the biological aspect of it, and the physics part of it. And I also told you that every baking item has a proportion, has a measurement. You can't just use your head to start guessing. No. As I've also given an illustration whereby I said I have a very simple basic recipe that has the same ingredients but produces four different results. And this is due to the mixing method, is due to the baking method. One recipe, four mixing method, two baking method, and four different results. I it's always very, very amazing when I see the reactions from my students after sharing the recipe and carrying it out. I'm like, wow, wow, I can't believe it's this same recipe that's producing all these different results. Yes, that is what baking as a science entails. It makes you understand everything that goes into your baked treats. So I think this should be like a welcome episode for this live stream. And if it's successful, if I get a positive response, if I get positive response, I'll continue uploading live streams once in a while to share my moments of truths in the baking industry, what I've been using for years, have been working for me, what I've taught my on-site and online students. So let me get it in the comment section what you want to talk about next. I really love to see them. I want to see your feedback. I want to see your reactions. So till next time, thank you for your support and bye.